Your neighbor can be a really interesting person. You might share pleasantries at the fence line while you're remowing your lawn, or maybe you have an awesome neighbor who brings over fresh baked goods from time to time. But sometimes your neighbor might be a little too interested in your life. In today's video, we're going to be reading from a subreddit about creepy neighbors. So let's get right into it. The first story is, my neighbor knocked on my door at 2 a.m. and then recorded me through my window. This happened last night at about 2 a.m. I live in a home that has one floor with 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. All the bedrooms are located on the same side of the house, and all the windows are on the other side facing the backyard. So basically, if you want to go into any of the bedrooms, you have to walk through the living room. The living room has a sliding glass door and 2 large windows. I was in my bedroom sleeping with my boyfriend when we heard a knock at the door. When the knocking continued, my boyfriend got up to check the door. He opened the door just slightly and yelled, "What?" No response. Then he heard shuffling outside the door, and the doorknob jiggled a bit. My boyfriend, being the smart man that he is, immediately slammed the door shut and locked it. We were both now wide awake, sitting in the dark of our room listening for whatever was outside the door to leave. But it didn't. Whatever it was kept knocking and occasionally trying to turn the doorknob. Well, after about 10 minutes, we heard what sounded like footsteps moving away from the door. My boyfriend and I exchanged glances, unsure of what to do. Do we call the cops? Maybe it was just a kid trying to score some candy. And if we called the cops over something so dumb, they'd probably laugh and tell us to go back to sleep. So we decided to wait it out. It wasn't until 45 minutes later that we heard the knocking start again, this time more insistent than before. It sounded like someone was screaming for help. Once again, my boyfriend went to the door and yelled, "What do you want?" And once again, no reply. The knocking stopped, and about an hour later, we heard it again. But this time it sounded like the person was right outside our window. It sounded like fingernails scratching against the glass. My boyfriend and I looked at each other, terror-stricken. This time there was no hesitation. We called the police. My boyfriend put on all the lights, and I got in the shower to wash the image of the doorknob jiggling out of my head. Within 10 minutes, we heard sirens and saw red and blue lights flashing in our front yard. 2 officers walked up to our door, asking if everything was okay. After explaining what had happened, they checked our doors and windows for signs of forced entry. Apparently, the glass on our window was etched, and they couldn't see in, but I'm sure whoever was out there could. They asked if we wanted them to stay and keep watch, but we declined since it had only happened twice that night. They told us to call if anything else happens and left. Well, my boyfriend and I were finally able to go back to sleep until about 7 a.m. when our new puppy started barking furiously at the front door. I got up to let the dog out and noticed a Ring camera on the other side of the street facing my house had been recording my front door all night. There was a man standing next to it holding a phone. It was on until I looked at the timestamp that I realized the recording had started at 1 a.m. Whoever this guy was, he had been recording my house for 5 hours straight. Luckily, Ring cameras don't record audio, so we have no idea what he was saying, but I've never felt so violated and scared in my entire life. My boyfriend and I are getting a dog and moving the Ring camera. Down in the comments, we have this story from OPC. When I was in high school, I had a neighbor who lived behind us. His house was much closer to ours than the houses on the street in front of him, because his driveway cut through a portion of the front yard. One evening, I was homesick from school and lying in bed watching TV. I heard a knock on my bedroom window. I sat up and looked out the window to see a man on the other side. Startled, I quickly shut the blinds and turned away from the window. A few moments passed and I heard another knock. Was it my imagination, or was that man trying to talk to me? I hesitated for a moment, then slowly pulled the blind up a crack and peered out the window. The man was gone. I shut the blind back down and returned to my TV show. A couple of hours later, I was awoken from my slumber by another knock on the window. I groaned, threw off the covers and stomped over to the window. Before I could even pull the blind up, I heard a loud voice yell through the closed window, "Hey, are you there?" I froze, terrified. Who was that? How did he know I was home? I couldn't see through the blind, but I could hear the sound of his heavy footsteps circling my house. Thinking quickly, I grabbed my cell phone and dialed 911. I explained what was happening, and the operator calmly asked me to stay on the line while dispatchers sent officers my way. I could still hear the man walking around outside my window, and I began to panic. I had to get away from the window. I backed away slowly, keeping an eye on the blind, afraid that if I turned my back completely, I would miss whatever was about to happen. Just then, the front door flew open. My mom came out of the hallway holding a baseball bat. Her face was pale and her eyes were wide with fear. "Get away from the window," she whispered urgently. She didn't need to tell me twice. I scrambled away from the window and hid behind the bed, hugging my pillow tight to my chest. As the seconds ticked by, my mom didn't come back into the room. I crept toward the door and peeked out. I could hear voices coming from downstairs, my mom's and the police officers. Relieved, I ran down the stairs and into the living room. That's when I saw him. Standing in front of my mom, hands raised in submission, was the same man who had been knocking on my window. Turns out he'd come to the wrong house and meant to visit his friend down the street. Well, that was embarrassing, and I was scolded by my mom for not calling the cops sooner, and he got arrested for trespassing. So yeah, it's probably best to call the cops sooner. And that's all for this week's video. If you liked this video, make sure to subscribe and leave a like. If you want to see more videos like this, then check out the playlist right here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.